Today's session is scripting and remote access support. During this session, we're going to learn about the basic scripting and how to use remote access technologies to provide support to the clients. By the end of the session, we want to be able to describe why IT support uses scripts and how they are written and executed. Ultimate goal is to be able to also remote access and explain the role and purpose in user support, including when to use it and when not to use it overall. Name the steps to using remote access software to navigate the user's computer. And overall, we want to understand that IT supports tasks that can be repetitive in nature. And obviously, mistakes can be done. The more you do it, the more you get tired, the more you believe you actually already did it. Therefore, developing scripts and allows you to, one, do it much faster because of the fact that in human nature, we're going to make mistakes. So now we got to redo it. And two, it guarantees that after you have created this script, be that you are going to be giving it maybe some type of variables or answers, it will always do the exact same thing over and over. A script file is a text document that contains commands that can be executed in any text editor, such as a notepad. Window batch scripts are called .bat. Those are very good also, and it will be done in the command line, or we call the terminal black screen. You also have your window PowerShell scripts overall. Those are more powerful in their nature because of the fact that now you can fully control as an administrator the computer within that blue screen compared to the black screen, which mimics the old DOS. It now has full administrative functions. You can develop scripts to be able to now automate all management and administrative tasks. A shell script or bash one within Linux is equivalent to the batch file that we just mentioned inside Windows. It contains a list of commands again to execute by the actual bash shell or whatever given shell you may be using. As I mentioned a moment ago, we have variables. We also have environment variables. The environment variables are to be able to store locations in the OS or the operating system itself. They move or they remove the mistakes again. So if I put in Windows what we call the %sign username %sign as an example, I can always make it equivalent to whatever that user is inside that computer logged in. Again, removes all the mistakes that can be done. And then at the same time, now that different users are going in and out of this computer, since I now made it as a variable that can look up the actual user that who is in there, I don't need to keep on reinventing the wheel. It'll just look it up. Just imagine if more than 45 people are actually logging into this system, it makes it very difficult to just go every single time, manually create a different program for each one. So these environment variables remove that burden. Now you can just easily add your own or use the existing ones that are inside the OS itself. There are several different types of remote access technologies, including your remote desktop protocol, which is your RDP, your virtual network computing, telnet, secure shells. When we are connecting to these different computers, we need to ensure that we take this serious because of the fact that even though we have a ticket that tells us that we're supposed to go and fix something, we need to ensure that when we are going to connect, we, one, have the actual user approval to be able to start the connection, authenticate. Now we have their approval to get in. Now we're going to let them know, hey, look, I'm going to have to take control right now. A lot of these software impedes them from even touching it. You can touch a button so it can stop them, but it freaks them out. So you need to know or let them know, sorry, what is going on. After you have access and you have completed whatever task you have to effectively communicate with this person at all times, disconnect and ensure that they have control of the computer back or whatever it is that you just connected to. Within these things are, we have to understand, we have to be persistent. Nothing in nature here will be the same. Obviously, some of these things, as we stated, which is the scripts, they are repetitive in nature, so that would be, but in overall, we have to listen and be attentive to the customer, make sure that we communicate effectively. In reference to scripting, you have your basic scripting itself. IT supports can, as I stated before, be very repetitive. So creating this similar file that you see here, it can mimic anything that you need to do. For instance, you can actually set it up so inside Windows, in the morning, you can actually have a scheduled task that runs, which runs this actual basic script, will create all of the necessary tasks, run scripts on even databases to effectively either download, upload. You could even do stuff as in manipulate data and do all your tasks. I still remember in UPS that a lot of times the network would be so saturated throughout the day that it was impossible to be able to even complete my job. Therefore, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was technically working. It completed all my work. And by the time I logged in the morning, my job, at least that part of my job, which used to take me almost 4 to 5 hours just because of the download and everybody on that network, by the time I got in, that was completed and I can do any other task that I wanted to complete. Hence, repetitive in nature. And now I alleviated myself from having to do something so I can actually concentrate on something that can be more uh, useful for the company. Now, in programming versus scripting, there is a huge variance between the two. In the actual programming languages, as you see in the C or C++ on your right side over here versus your scripting or your interpreter. When you script, there is a software, an interpreter that who is basically interpreting exactly what you wrote. From there, it goes towards the actual OS. From that, you have your web browser. It does scripting. You have your JavaScript. You may not understand what's back there, but it is actually back there. Each time the browser opens up or you try to run a certain thing back there, that JavaScript must be interpreted and passed on to the OS. Versus the programming itself, after the compiler compiles the information, and you install this software, it is executed in machine code language. It is not by the OS. The major difference there is that for whoever programmed the actual program needs to go back to the code. So you could always think about this as an exe file for those that are familiar with Windows. You can't go to that code. If you even try to open that code in Notepad, it looks like a big jarbled mess compared to the original code that was compiled inside the compiler. Scripting languages themselves, you have the compiled one, as I mentioned, which was a C++, C, Java, not to be confused with JavaScript. You have your scripting or interpreting program languages. Now, each time this is run, as I stated, it must be interpreted by whatever it is. Hence here, your Visual Basic, your Pythons, your JavaScripts. Each time it must be done by that interpreter compared to the compiled program. After it's been compiled, it is an exe file. There's really nothing there to do per se from the OS itself. For your scripting languages, I mentioned before, you have your Windows.bat, your PowerShell files are .ps1, your Linux shell scripts are .sh, your VB scripts are the VBS, JavaScripts are the .js, and your Pythons are the .py. In the Windows batch, as you can see, I can actually record information and compile information. In this one right here that we see, it's echoing off IP config all, and it is actually sending it out to the generation report itself. Now that text file will contain the information. I can actually mimic this and continue to append information to these files depending on how I want to. I can also open the report at the end. Whatever it is that I write inside this batch script, it will mimic it like if it was in the terminal or the black screen and run it. That was where the batch files are done inside the CLI compared to your actual files, which is your PS1s. Now, your Windows PowerShell, those are more robust files. Those .ps1 files can automate anything you like, including anything in that black screen that we just mentioned ago. All those commands are there. Even some of the base Linux commands are now integrated into this Windows PowerShell because Windows PowerShell basically was created by someone in Linux. Don't tell me who. I don't know those type of details. Overall, it will automate and create and facilitate your job. The more you are to be able to go in there and look at that, the easier your job is. You also have inside the Windows PowerShell the ability to ask it questions. So if you go into Windows PowerShell ISE, bear with me for a second. That's one. Yeah, there he is. You'll be able to write your own scripts you like. At the same time, it has the capabilities of answering it, and then you hit run. So here's the interpreter, and then he'll run it down here. All this, you could even debug, you can add, where is he? No, that's not it. Administrator. Doesn't want to show me it. View, there it is. So you can actually come in here and select any of the ones that you want. At the same time, you could ask it to show you any details in reference to it. It'll have even happily ask you for information so that you could be able to answer that information and be able to just insert at the end. It will copy that over here and write it over here for you. So let's just put anything we like over here. And insert. Oh, he's in the bottom. There he is. So he just went and grabbed my information in here, add computer. So even if you don't know the commands, you will be able to learn the commands. You can actually copy this over here and paste it up here. With this, you'll see that in this one, I can actually add any computer. If I create the variables so that I have an answer text file, it can actually just go through an infinite loop until it goes through all the records inside that text file. As soon as that is completed, it'll stop and voila, you have 100 computers created in less than 5 seconds. Your shell scripts, which is equivalent to the window bash. The main difference is here, what I love about Linux is that you really don't need that .sh, really. Overall, you'll see here that it says your little hashtag and that execution. And now I'm telling it exactly what program is it that it's using. For those that might know what that is there. Then overall, the hashtag usually is equivalent to saying negate or just this is for humans to read. Don't worry about this to the computer. And the next line is telling you echo good morning. Equivalent to the bash files. Once again, you can do anything that's inside this terminal. So whatever's in the bash, you can use. You'll have if statements that you can create and be able to create loops to be able to facilitate, again, variables that you can actually use with any anything that's inside the OS itself. As I mentioned at the beginning, environment variables are a storage location that the OS is aware of. Inside the actual Windows, there is the percent sign system drive, percent sign system root. These are all defaults that they have in there that makes it go and look up that certain information. You can always do this also in the Linux. It's a little bit more complicated, but overall inside the Windows environment variables, it is as simple as just going into the advanced page of system properties and the dialog box where it says environment variables. You'll be able to add anything you like in there for your own purposes. For instance, UPS had a lot of applications, and since at that time there was a big trend of using two hard drives, and it still is, so you can have one for the OS and one just for your applications or for whatever storage that you have. So you could just see that it can get a little bit tedious if somehow, some way, that PC does not know where UPS apps is. Be that now your drive may be only one C drive, but his is a C and a D. So now that that answer is in there and it lets them know where exactly it's installed, whenever the programmer asks for UPS apps on anything that's installed in a UPS computer, that OS already knows exactly where in this computer UPS apps is. That is usually what happens in these Fortune 500 companies. They have a flavor of Windows that's not a street Windows, and they also have the capabilities of setting that throughout the whole company. So we're going to do here a small little batch file that we're supposed to be able to create. I believe you guys have an exercise that you'll be able to download. I will be pausing here so you guys can be able to work on that. And hopefully you found that exercise useful. As you see how you can actually create a batch to be able to store information like your directory into a file and have that information facilitated for you. In reference to remote access, my friends, we have several, not just these here. You see RDP, your virtual network computing, telnet, secure shells. There is a plethora of softwares to be able to remote access, be that it is routers, switches, computers, servers, whatever it is that you're going to be remote accessing. Each one gives you a different type of flavor. As for RDP, whenever you try to connect to a computer that's RDP, you will not see that person's desktop. You will always be connecting to that computer. At that point, it will mimic like if they got logged off and ask them to log on. Hence why we need to make sure that whenever we're connecting to these computers, they are fully aware of what's going on, what to expect, and what you are doing. In the virtual network computing, telnet, and secure shells, those are also softwares to be able to remote access. But RDP is one of the ones that are extremely used throughout the Windows environment. You'll be able to mimic even full desktop, or you could just set up the display to a certain thing, even say what type of local resources, if you want them, your printer to be in there, or if you want their printer, whatever it is that's you want to experience, you can use it. As I stated before, it will give you full access, but it will disconnect them. They will not be able to see what you're doing. Hence, we need to make sure that they are fully aware of what's going on. Your virtual network computing is a remote control tool for sharing of desktops. As I mentioned before, RDP uses a the capability of going in with your ID and they won't be able to see. In this one, This one you will be able to go in and typically support without any issues. It is another software that you would have to install. Telnet is equivalent to the old dumb terminals. Very dangerous because all of this information is passed in the clear text. You can sometimes encrypt the information by using the SSH, but obviously then you might as well use SSH. Port 23, as we mentioned before, for remote access is one of the most dangerous ports you can use throughout the network. So we need to ensure that we are using a secured. Obviously, if it is maybe some of these switches and routers, when they first come up, the only thing they have is Telnet open, then we should direct connect to these devices, make sure we reconfigure them correctly, and then configure them if you're going to do it through the network through SSH. Your secure socket shells, my friend, as I just alluded to, encrypts all communications, hence using your TCP port 22. It is much better than your telnet because it is now, that's the only major variance, is encrypted. No one's seen the password. No one's seen anything that's going on inside this terminal. It looks exactly the same like the other screen you just saw. The only variance is here you are over a secure and encrypt channel. Secure considerations is that each of the remote access technologies have their own security flaws, as we know. Windows RDP, it is Windows. Either which way, Telnet does not have any type of encryption. And even if we're doing it through SSH, passwords can be compromised. So doesn't always mean that you are secure. So in what types of situations do we think remote access would be the right tool? You guys give me an example on which ones you think would be a case. Margaret or Kelly.
When you would need to access, files on your work computer when you are working remotely.
Or if you need to remote into someone else's computer to assist them with any type of technical issue. If you're on the network and you're using some type of remote access application.
Thank you. So one of the things that's tricky for the wrong one is a lot of people assume quickly that they're going to be able to go fix things. If I would tell you that, and I call you and I say, hey, Marvin, I'm having problems getting to the internet. Apparently, we all can't even download emails. Would that be a good time to try to remote?
No, sir. Because I would need internet access to remotely access your PC. So
Yeah.
in most cases.
Yeah, that's where we need to take note and listen carefully. Again, customer focus and not assume that, hey, let me go and see what's going on with the configuration of your email or configuration of this. If we listen carefully, technically the whole thing is down. So nothing's going to work for that individual. For remote support, we do need basic hardware computer. Hello. Powered on. At the same time, some of these devices nowadays, I believe even through the iPad, I remember now, we used to be able to RDP and connect. I think it was RDP. I know it was some software we were able to use and support through our actual iPad. So since we were traveling techs out and about, it was easier to use the iPad or even the phone. It was a big Samsung phone. Someone didn't like to have the actual iPad. So Team viewer, log me in and remote desktop. As I mentioned before, RDP will get you in, my friends, but it will not give you their desktop. Why do I keep on saying that? Because of the fact that Team Viewer and Log Me In now allows me to see your desktop. I, as a technician, have full rights to the domain. So therefore, if I have full rights to the domain, your problem is not my problem. I'm not trying to be funny. It's just when I log in, you're not going to have the same problem, and I'm not going to have the exact same problem you're having because I have full rights. It could be something about your rights or something that you're doing that's creating it in your profile, but my profile is not having that. Therefore, Team Viewer, log me in, NetOp, there's several different types of access that allows you to see exactly what the user is doing. Either which way, we want to ensure that we follow the proper steps when we're remote controlling of any computer, determining which the computer is in the network. If necessary, instruct to download the actual software so you can be able to get in. This usually happens, let's say if you call Dell Support Center, they may ask you to go and add a little plugin. Authentication is when you enter the appropriate credentials to be able to get in. Again, all this, you're going to be explaining to them just the part where they are involved. I might, oh, am I entering my ID and password? I mean, no. Granting control. If the client is obviously present, you need to make sure you have control. If they're not present, so now I have a ticket, came in, Menganito's not here, and I'm going into his or her computer. I should have hopefully planned ahead, right? Because when I'm triaging these tickets, one of the things I should have done when I triage was determine when I was going to do it and reach out to the client to let them know that I will be coming in. Therefore, if they are there, we're going to be requesting control. If not, we should be at least sending them an email letting them know, hey, you are not at your desk right now. I'm attempting to try to fix this, and or call them on the line and leave them a voicemail. If you see that they have locked their screen, you cannot proceed. So you have to be very careful. And when you're going and accessing, you need to make sure you have permission. Now that you have gotten in and you are in access, you can see and control the keyboard as if you were sitting in front of this actual computer. Do whatever it is that you need to do to be able to complete the actual task that's been given. Overall, we need to always make sure and check with the actual client if what was completed actually fixed what they were asking for. Prior to disconnecting and or the call afterwards, we need to make sure that they have control. So now I disconnected. I can't see your screen, but I need to make sure, are you back up and running? Can you actually move your mouse? Can you log in? So in scenario one, the client needs help setting up a new router. In a new router, we need to identify here if they have a network we mentioned before or not. In this case, if it is a new router, then it's not on a network. Therefore, would not be appropriate to be able to connect. The next one was the client is getting strange pop-ups and suspects malware. At that time, we can listen carefully and notice that technically network is up. At one time, when we can identify that it is some type of malware, we may remove it from the network, but we can, though, connect remotely at that point. A lot of the times, though, in some of these Fortune 500 companies, the appropriate thing is to remove it immediately from the network if it is suspected. A Windows update on a client's computer is not working. Once again, keywords here is in reference to the client computer itself, not the network, not the switch, not a router that's down. So in this case, it is Windows Update, and we should be able to remote look at it and try to fix it. Next one here, we have a distressed client calls the help desk because her internet is down. So if her internet connection, as we mentioned before, that's a key word there, In that case, it would not be appropriate. At that point, we would actually escalate it to the local POTS or whoever the ISP is, if it is an internet service provider, to be able to bring up that circuit and or DSL, whatever it is for that location. The client does not know how to edit headers and footers in a Word document. This one always makes me giggle because of the fact that in a lot of these companies, although you can remote, I agree, you can remote. A lot of these companies would not allow you to go and train this user in reference to how to edit a header and a footer. So we need to be careful. Obviously, if it is that they're coming and calling me and that's what the center is for, then we help them. But a lot of the cases, that would not be even an acceptable ticket. An employee who missed the workshop on a new email system has multiple questions about transferring his mail from the old system. In this one, it looks like we were involved because it says we missed the workshop for the new system. So in that case, most likely, if they don't have a set group and you are allowed, then yes, it is appropriate. I can remote. The only thing that they need is help in reference to that new system. As we mentioned before, customer service, we need to listen to the customer before we even react. We even try to resolve the issue. Make sure we understand exactly what's going on because of the fact that if we try to assume when we start receiving 2 or 3 calls where somebody's saying email and then you think it's the exact same thing, that will frustrate the users. Make sure that also never blame anybody. Don't ever be defensive. There's no reason. We're here providing a service. And in providing a service, as I mentioned to a lot of my students, in IT, technically you work for Disney World because you're here to provide service. You're not here to blame anyone in reference to anything, and at any point try to even defend yourself about anything. If they're rude at any given point, you can escalate that issue. But we are not to go and stoop down to their level. We will obviously express empathy and ensure that we try to make them understand that we understand their concerns. And at the same time, we may say we're sorry that this has happened, but we don't blame it on Marvin. I don't say, oh, I know Marvin's always messing up everybody's email. Let me see what I can do to help you out. No, that's not the way to express empathy. You're not, I just blame my whole team. We can anticipate, but we do not assume, my friends. We can anticipate the customer needs in reference to certain things. So we just mentioned a moment ago about the new mail system. So we may anticipate something that a lot of people ran into. So why not make sure we give that as a nice to know, right? That we can anticipate for the customer and say, hey, a lot of the people tend to freak out because they can't find it. Now it's gone into that new server where it's now being archived. You're no longer going to see that in your here, but it's in this screen. Now you are anticipating their needs. They understand that it's a new system and that they don't need to go into this screen. They need to go into the actual archive screen to find their emails. Lastly, is to proactively suggest solutions for any of the issues that they have brought up to you. At the same time, we should train the user in reference to if it is themselves that created it or something that could probably be avoided in the future. Information to provide clients about the remote support itself. As we mentioned, make sure you are fully trained on what the proper procedures are for that company. At the same time, CompTIA has its own standards for following the proper procedures. We need to understand what is the company's because sometimes, even if we have already spoken to the actual user, but if we do not call them first, this was something some of the technicians were getting in trouble with because of the fact that I told Kelly I'm going to be there at 12 o'clock. And so it's 12 o'clock and they net opt into the machine. I let Kelly know yesterday, But did I call Kelly right before? No. Therefore, that technician was violating their privacy because of the fact I understand they may not have anything that's illegal per se, but whatever they work on, you as IT are not privy to that information, accounting information, HR information. You're not allowed to see any of the information that's on their desktop. Therefore, you need to make sure that you notify them prior to going in. Explain the actual process to them so that they understand what's happening. Letting them know that you're going to connect, authenticate, and that you're going to be taking control fully of that computer to stop moving their mouse. And obviously, we need to give the client more or less a time of how long we're going to take. All of this, hopefully, we're doing it prior to when we did the triage and we actually told them, hey, I'm going to be coming in tomorrow, Kelly. It's going to take me maybe half an hour to be able to resolve your issue. If not, we're going to have to escalate it. So then now I called you. I'm working. I connected to it. I make sure that I work on it and let you know what's going on. And sometimes maybe they step away, but so call them again and say, hey, I completed this task. You're not at your desk. Usually they have like a little text thing that you can text them inside these softwares. A lot of the pitfalls that some of these people do is that the client may have difficulty understanding what's going on. Some of these software requires them to either hit a button or give you a code it's an MFA authentication for it be able to even to come in. You're not going to know the code. They need to give you that code. Some organizations have other type of firewalls that impede this or stop this from being in there. So you may be Dell support and you're telling them to go and install this certain software add-on and it's not letting them. We need to be at the same time understand what we can and cannot do with some of these computers. We also have issues with a lot of these devices because of the fact that you're remote controlling from a distant. Sometimes they don't understand that it is you, not NetApp. For instance, NetApp, once again, that's the one that I'm in there. But sometimes in RDP or some of these other softwares, the computer has such short time span between the mouse movements that the user has as a setting that it actually goes to sleep. The worst thing is obviously when you have poor network connectivity over the network, that will impede you because of the fact that it will continue to drop and disconnect you. At that time, a lot of the times, it's more appropriate to try to walk the user through it and maybe just watch them. So that way you can actually use less resources and allow them to complete the tasks. As I stated before, my friends, at this point, we should have learned about the basic scriptings and how to use remote access technologies, be able to hopefully describe why IT support uses these scripts and how they are written and executed, describe the remote access and explain its role and purpose in user support, including when to use it. Name the steps to using remote access. And we need to understand that all these tools that we have for ourselves has a place, right? We have our script files, which are the Windows batch files. We have actual ones for Linux, which are the bash files or bash shell script files. We have a Windows PowerShells. We also have variables and other stuff that we can use to be able to facilitate and answer some of this stuff for us. Pretty much that is my section for today. If there's no questions.